Alrighty, this is the Kubernetes community meeting. This is a live stream event that's going to be posted publicly on YouTube. So please be mindful of anything that you say is being recorded. I do ask that everybody just mute their lines if you're not speaking. We do also have a code of conduct, so please be excellent to each other. Before we start, can I get a note taker? I am handicapped, so I will not be typing.
Also, who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to go into that. My name is Marky. I am with SIG. I'm a software engineer. I also am with the SIG contributor experience and also part of the event staff for KubeCon 2019. And that's me.
I volunteer as note taker.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you. All righty. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to go over the agenda just so anybody doesn't know. This is my first time I'm doing it, so I'm going to botch it horribly. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity. So you guys know who I am. We know who the note taker is. We are going to have a demo from our Google Summer of Code student, Elijah. We'll be going over the release updates. Then we'll be doing SIG updates and then general announcements. I am going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Elijah to do the demo. Elijah, thank you very, very much for not only joining this, but your awesome work with the Google Summer of Code, and I will turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction. Maki, can you all hear me very well?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm Elijah. Let me share my screen now. So I'm Elijah. I worked on the Kubernetes dashboard from May to the ending of August to add support for custom resource definitions to the Kubernetes dashboard. So I had two mentors, Marcin and Sebastian, and they both work for Lutze. So what we set out to do was to so originally the Kubernetes dashboard supported third-party resources, but when they were replaced in Kubernetes by CRDs, the TPR support was removed from dashboard. So for a while there wasn't really any support for extensions. So the aim for this project was to provide support for custom resource definitions in the dashboard. The main features that the support was going to have was a page to view all the CRDs in the cluster, and then a separate page to display the details of each CRD with CRD specific information such as versions, conditions, and then a list of objects for each CRD. And then from the from the object list page, you should be able to go to the details for each specific object. And then we will display the metadata for each object and then show the raw data for the object, because there really wasn't a way to display objects in a structured manner because they could have arbitrary nodes. And then we would also have a section to display events for each object. Then we also wanted support to be able to edit and delete CRDs right from the dashboard. Then some additional features that we wanted to have was supporting sub-resources for CRDs, especially the scale sub-resource. So on the Kubernetes dashboard, previously you could already scale deployments. You could already scale deployments. So because some CRDs also have the ability to support the scale sub-resource, we also wanted to integrate support for scaling to the dashboard. And then we also wanted to pin CRDs to the sidebar. So we decided to pin CRDs because originally the plan was log into the Kubernetes dashboard, and then all the CRDs in the cluster would be displayed in the sidebar. But we discussed that approach and discovered that some clusters might have a large number of CRDs. So instead of displaying everything at once, we could just show a single menu item for custom resource definitions that would allow users to pin any CRDs as they might wish. So some of the mockups that were originally designed for the CRD list page, you can see this full is a CRD showing a list of objects for the CRD. And this is another CRD. We can see the menu entry, the sidebar. Then for the CRD details page, you can see the metadata section and then the object section, so showing the objects that have been created for the CRD. And then we had the object details page. So um, so yeah, you can see some of the actions that the action section here. So of course, during the implementation, there were lots of other things that were added. For example, pinning sub resources, we had to have a separate icon right here. And then when you're scaling objects, also we had to add a separate action icon here as well. So now for the demo, I have the Kubernetes dashboard open in my browser already. This is the page it takes you to when you open it up. Then the menu entry for custom resource definitions is right here. Okay, so so we have custom resource definition. I'm going to go ahead and create some CRDs here. Right, so I just created 3 different CRDs. Then it displays the some basic information for CRDs here, including the full name, the group, and whether or not they are namespaced or cluster scoped. So going to the CRD details page, we can see the resource information section, the names that have been accepted for the CRD. And currently there is no object for this particular CRD, then we can see conditions as well. So let me create some objects. And then there's a live update here, so we can see that we have an objection up here. We can see the raw data for the CRD, and then there's no events here currently. So deleting objects, for example, so that works fine. We can see that there's no object for this particular CRD anymore. Then the icon for pinning CRDs is up here in the action bar. So clicking on this pins the CRD to the taskbar and is persisted in a config map. So it's cluster wide, it persists across reloads. And then apart from the action icon to pin CRDs, we also have a separate menu item to pin and unpin. And then scaling also works. We have a scaling, so for CRDs that support the scale sub resource, for example, it's going to show up under the resource information. And the current tab, for example, supports scaling. So clicking on the menu drop down for this particular object, for example, we can see the scale pop up, and then we can set a particular scale replica number. So there isn't any controller powering this particular CRD, so it's not spinning anything up or anything, but we can see that the desired replica section is shown up there, and then we can delete and perform a bunch of other actions here as well. So that has been the scope of supporting CRDs, and we hope the community can test out this particular feature and give us some helpful feedback regarding future implementation. Thank you.
That was really cool. Thank you very much, Elijah. I do have a question for you though. How was it that how was your summer of code experience with the Kubernetes community?
Yeah, so my experience was really great. I was communicating regularly with my mentors on Slack, and for a while, so I started contributing to Kubernetes around February. I started opening a few pull requests against the Kubernetes dashboard, and so I got to know some of the SIG leads and get familiar with the general process of contributing. So when the program itself started in May, I was a bit familiar with the process. So I'd gotten familiar with the code base as well. So contributing was really straightforward. My mentors were very helpful in case I had any problems. Then there were other people in the community also that, for example, Stefan, so I could, just chat up a few people and ask for help whenever I'm stuck. So, so generally the community was very helpful and I learned a lot and it has helped me improve my skill and also land a job. So I started working with Replex.io just 2 weeks ago. So building Kubernetes monitoring solutions. So it's been a very helpful experience for me, and I loved the chance to work on uh, with the Cloud Native Computer Foundation.
That is really great to hear, and that just know it's great to know that you learned something, you got a job out of it, and you keep continuing and coming back. And who knows, maybe next year you can be a mentor on the project. So just really awesome, and I thank you very much for doing that. Very
I
awesome.
would love to. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
All righty, we are going to move right on into our release updates. So I will turn it over to our awesome release manager. I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm going to try it anyway. So please
do it.
It's Lachlan.
Close. If I was born in France, it would have been, but I wasn't. Sorry. So it's Lachlan.
Lachlan. Jeez,
Lachlan.
I'm sorry. I owe you.
It's okay.
I owe you a drink or a hamburger or vegan meal, whichever works.
It's all good. I just like hearing people struggle with it. It's good fun. I think my parents do too. That's why they gave it to me. Wonderful. Thank you, Marky. Okay, so release updates. Hi, my name's Lachlan. I am the 1.16 release lead. I'm going to give you some updates on 1.16, which is the release that's coming out in 2 weeks' time. So the delivery date for 1.16 is slated at September 16th, which is not next Monday, the Monday after. A couple of deadlines coming up that you should be aware of if you are participating in this release or really interested on its impending release. The docs deadline, I'm going to remove this first line. It's all in the agenda as well. 9/9, which is next Monday, doc PRs should be complete. So if you have an enhancement that's landing in 1.16, you need to have your docs PRs reviewed and merged by next Monday, 9/9. 9/10 is actually RC1. So RC1 is also coincides with code thaw. And what code thaw means is we stop fast forwarding the branch with master and we break it off into its own branch. And then any bug fixes need to come in via the cherry pick process. So they are the main three milestones coming up next week for 1.16. In terms of patch releases for the current supported releases, which is 1.13, 1.14, and 1.15, we are targeting the next set of patches to go out just after 1.16.0, so the same week as 9.16. We don't have a date yet. It's probably the Thursday of that week. So that would be 1.13.11, 1.14.7, and 1.15.4 going out the week of September 16th, which means the cherry pick deadline, if you have fixes that you need to get into those releases, you need to have them appropriately labeled by Friday, September 13th. Okay, and we've got the target there. The release schedule is linked in the agenda. And thank you, Tim. I see your cursor going for putting those updates in there. Very much appreciated. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest releases and when they come out and things like CVEs and fixes that fix CVEs, go ahead and sign yourself up to the Kubernetes Dev mailing list, and you will be the first people to know once that happens. That is it for release updates. I will flick it back over to Marky. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. The release team, I'm going to give you a broken arm clap here. The release team is that's no small feat there. So I really appreciate, and I'm sure the entire community does, all the work you guys put in. Like I said, it's massive. There's a lot of things to deal with. So thank you very, very, very much for all that you guys do. Cool. Moving right along, we are going to go into the SIG updates. One note on the SIG updates, the SIG networking will be moving to next week. So we will see you there. First up, let's see, we will go with SIG Windows. I see Michael is on.
Yeah, hi everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Assuming you guys can all see it.
Yes.
All right, cool. So my name is Michael. I'm one of the co-chairs for SIG Windows along with Patrick Lang, and I'll give you guys a quick update today and we'll also do a demo. So first things off, we want to basically recognize and congratulate two individuals that have had significant contributions to the SIG Windows community for the past 1 year plus. That's Deep DeBroy and Ben Moss. We're recognizing them and making them as technical leads on SIG Windows so they can start reviewing and approving pull requests for each other, as well as continuing their technical excellence within our community. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about 1.16. Ever since we went GA with 1.14, we've been working on improving the end user experience around Windows. And that includes a wide variety of areas, starting with enabling Windows users to leverage better identity options so that containers can access other external resources within the network, communicate with databases, communicate with file servers, or even other services within their environment. And in order to be able to do that, we had to enable two specific key technologies. The one is called Group Managed Service Accounts, which we're graduating to beta with 1.16. So congratulations to the team for moving that along the further down the path. And then we're also introducing a new capability called Run as Username that will enable the initial process that kickstarts the container to carry a specific identity as well. So both of those are Windows identity options. Windows developers are expecting these capabilities. They're used to using Active Directory identity when they're creating workloads and applications. So enabling this in Kubernetes is a key capability. We're also announcing alpha support for kubeadm join. The Windows community, along with significant contributions from the SIG cluster lifecycle, Lubomir made significant contributions here along with Kayla and Ben Moss. We're introducing a certain set of scripts that will be maintained by the SIG Windows community, and they will allow end users to install all the prerequisites and CNI so they can stand up and prepare a node so it is ready to be joined to the environment. And then we added support for kubeadm join, so you can add the Windows node to the cluster, you can get it to the ready state, and it will be ready to start accepting workloads. This is a significant step forward towards making it easier for users to stand up a hybrid heterogeneous cluster. We're also introducing alpha support for CSI. We've had a lot of users ask us about what are our storage options around Windows. And so far, we didn't really have a good story. We supported Flex Volume and a couple of other in-tree providers. With alpha support for CSI, we allow end users to leverage persistent storage options for Windows containers as well. And the way we've been able to do this, we had to bypass the capabilities and use a host OS proxy because Windows containers don't have execution privileges on the Windows node. So we had to use a host OS proxy to kind of bypass that requirement. But great work by the community on all three areas here. We're very excited for 1.16 and we look forward to advancing some of these capabilities to beta and GA quality down the line. So I'm going to switch it over to Deep DeBroy, who is an engineering manager at Docker, and he's going to give us a quick demo.
Hey, thank you. Hope all of you can hear me. And I'm going to start sharing my desktop. Let's see. All right. Great. So what we have here is a very simple Kubernetes cluster. The get nodes here shows you that we have a one Windows worker node, a standard master, and a Linux. So what I'm going to demonstrate here is how GMSA credential specs, one of the features that just went beta, works within Kubernetes. So let's get into some context around what is GMSA and why do we need it. So as some of you may be aware, Active Directory is an important foundational concept in Windows deployments in enterprises. And Active Directory allows applications deployed on Windows to have standard service account-based identities that can be moved from app to app as it moves between servers. And that same concept has been ported to the arena of containers. And runtimes like Docker allows a managed service account credential spec to be passed into a container and be spun up with it. So here we have the Windows node. And as we see here, it's connected to a domain. It's called Kubernetes GMSA, just for the sake of this demo. And there's also something called a managed service account, a GMSA, created within this domain. We're calling it GMSA E2E. From this GMSA, we create something called a credential spec, which is displayed here, and for which we have a PowerShell script that queries the necessary item and produces this credential spec document. On the Kubernetes side, what we did is we take this and we put it inside the cluster as a CRD. So if you look at the CRDs that have already been initialized in this cluster, we have something called the GMSA credential specs.windows.kubernetes.io. And specifically, we have created a GMSA E2E spec that corresponds to what I just showed you here. These are the same elements pretty much, but presented to the Kubernetes cluster as a CRD. What this allows you to do is maintain GMSA CRDs in an orchestrated fashion within Kubernetes. So a pod could be referring to a CRD, and it can move around from one node to another within the Windows nodes. And Kubernetes will take care of associating the correct GMSA identity to the pod wherever it comes up. You do not need to worry about making sure that the identity needs to follow the pod in some ad hoc out-of-band fashion. I'm seeing a lot of pop-ups here. Not sure if those are addressed towards me. Probably not. But OK, so jumping right back in. Let's see. Oops. OK. So now let's try to create a pod that uses this GMSA identity and comes up within the domain. So for that, I have something called IIS with GMSA. It's basically an IIS pod, the Internet Information Services pod, where we have configured a reference to the GMSA E2E that I just showed above. What this means, so this is kind of like the key part of the work we did. We made the GMSA credential spec name and the GMSA credential spec as parts of the core pod spec security option. And within that, we have a stanza called the Windows options, where you can specify these GMSA credential details. For ease of the user, you just need to specify a GMSA E2E, just the name of the GMSA. And we have a webhook, which does a couple of different things. One is validation of the fact that the service account that's using the GMSA does have access rights to it. In this case, we have already configured a cluster role binding that says that the default service account has access, has use permissions for this GMSA. And what it also does is when the pod is launched, it'll mutate the pod spec and put the actual credential spec details that we showed here within the pod spec. So let's go ahead and launch this. So IIS with GMSA.yaml. And so it's creating. Typically, creation takes a little while. OK, so now it's running. If we look at the pod details now, what we see here is the webhook, the mutating webhook we have configured did its job. And the GMSA spec name was actually expanded based on the CRD that was already configured within the cluster into the actual spec. So the whole thing is there now. Also, there's a command called nltest that allows you to verify whether the pod is correctly joined into the domain. So what we can do here is kubectl exec into the pod. And do test/domain trust. And that shows that we indeed joined the domain that we had configured on the Windows side. And just to double check that, that the kubelet through the Docker shim did its job, what we can do here is look at Docker PS, and we see that our pod came up. So we can do a Docker inspect on the container. And here, what you'll see is, let's see, where is the, so basically what happens is Docker assigns the credential spec details within the Docker container that it came up with as well. I'm not able to find the entry right now, but essentially what we do see here is the container was correctly configured with the GMSA, which results in the domain being correctly enumerated as part of NL test. Similarly, if you want, we can also go over IIS with without a GMSA specified.
Got about another 30, 45 seconds.
Yeah. So we came up, we brought up another one, and here you'll see that there's basically no GMSA in the config. And if we were to do the same exec as before, for the no auth case, we will see that pretty much no service is available, which means that pod did not get configured for the domain. So what that shows is the domain details are getting correctly configured within the pod as part of the kubectl integration that we did with Docker. And that same work is also part of CRI overall, and we're working with Microsoft to make sure that same integration works to Containerd for Windows.
Thank you, Deep. Dynamite demo. So moving forward for SIG Windows, our two highest priorities are continued investments around CRI Containerd and enabling that for Windows, as well as continue our kubeadm work and start working with the SIG cluster lifecycle team for CAP A and CAP V, so that we can enable those capabilities as well for cluster API. In the deck that's probably going to be shared in the notes, we also have contacts in terms of how you can reach us. And please, if anybody's interested in helping us advance the Windows vision, come in the SIG, talk to us. We'll have a lot of work that we can put you to do. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you very, very much for that detailed demo. Very much appreciated. I will now move on to SIG Autoscaling.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'm Marcin. I'm a SIG lead of SIG Autoscaling, and I will give you a brief update what's going on in our SIG. So before we start, a very, very brief introduction what we are responsible for. So the SIG is trying to adjust workloads and cluster infrastructure to match the current needs. We have three major components in our portfolio: horizontal pod autoscaler, which adds and removes pods to match the current traffic; vertical pod autoscaler, which makes pods smaller and bigger depending on their usage; and cluster autoscaler, which adds and or deletes nodes depending whether there are pending pods in the cluster or some nodes are not that much utilized. Okay, so what's new in horizontal pod autoscaler? Recently, we have been fixing various corner cases around how we are scaling up when some metrics are missing, how we are scaling down when some metrics are missing, because, for example, pods are unschedulable due to cluster being too small, and like various needs around pod count differences in status specs, in deployments, and HPA. We also increased test coverage and stability. The code had been cleaned up, and we have one important PR, which is unfortunately still in flight, which will try to add much more controls to how fast HPA is scaling up and down, and what are the well, timings there. In vertical pod autoscaler, we are slowly graduating VPA from beta to GA. Hopefully, it will be completed in near future. We added support for setting both pod requests and pod limits that was frequently requested by the community. We added cron job support, so now you can use vertical pod autoscaler with all deployments, stateful set jobs, and cron jobs, which were previously a little bit problematic, and we increased our support for getting metrics from Prometheus. In cluster autoscaler, we added 3 more cloud providers, so now you can autoscale your cluster with OpenShift. If you are using Magnum, you can do it with DigitalOcean, with Packet, and we added support for AWS Spot instances. We also improved performance around bin packing simulation inside of the core class of cluster autoscaler. We hopefully increased the scalability, and we passed direct responsibility for individual cloud providers to appropriate companies. So each cloud provider is now responsible for their own code. You can find us on Slack channel on SIG Autoscaling. We have meetings on Monday at 7 a.m. PST. So if you have any questions, concerns, ideas for new features, please come and join us on this meeting. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. A lot of great work there. Okay, moving right along, we're going to go into announcements. We have an update on the election updates from George, Ihor, Bob, and Brian. Grant, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, so this is just a repeat of last week. Basically, there are just 3 reminders here. If in order to vote, you need to be in Voters MD. That's the file that we use to ensure that you can vote. So it's kind of up to you to go in that file and see if you're in there. If you are not in there and you feel you've made enough contributions to be able to vote, but you're not in Voters MD, because we use DevStats for that, the second link there is to the form where you can write, hey, here's all the stuff that I've been doing that doesn't really get counted in GitHub. Please consider me for voting. And then if you're planning on running for steering committee, Wednesday, September 11th is actually the same deadline for PRing in your 400-word or 300-word biography with like your little platform and all that kind of stuff. And after that, it'll take us a week to prepare, and then the election begins, which should wrap up almost exactly a month from now. So I will continue to post these updates every Wednesday on the Kubernetes Dev mailing list and repeating it again in this meeting. Anyone have any questions, or Brian, Bob, or Ihor have any comments they'd like to add?
I just posted a link to voters.md and the elections directory generally to the chat, and we can also get into the agenda.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on the announcements is the proposals for sessions at the San Diego Contributor Summit for KubeCon. Those are open until the 9th of September. The form is in the agenda. That's going to be a really super awesome thing. So please do propose for sessions if you'd like to speak in there. George, did you want to add anything to that?
That's not me.
No, who is it?
Is Paris or someone else?
I think that would be me. Sorry. But you pretty much covered it. If you have content you want to see at the Contributor Summit, please submit forms. We're going to leave it open for a little while, and then we will have the content group try and pare it down. But we want to hear everyone's ideas. So thank you.
I didn't mean to steal thunder there. I apologize deeply. Okay, let's see. We have the last part is the shout outs. So I'll read through those. We have a shout out to, I'm going to butcher these names, but Legit, I think that for tirelessly deflaking our test. There is a link to that shout out in there. We also have a shout out to Ben the Elder and Catherine for their work on unblocking the queue for merges. Finally, there was a shout out to me for helping somebody with a Jenkins credential issue and general Jenkins automation. That pretty much sums up the meeting as far as the agenda is concerned. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? We've already agreed that I have tapped out my joke limit, so we won't go there. All righty, well then that concludes this meeting. We will upload the video to YouTube as soon as we can. And I thank everybody for joining on my first ever, which I'll be doing more through the remainder of this year.
Great job, Marky.
I'll hopefully work out the jokes a little bit better.
You crushed it, Marky. You crushed it. Thanks for doing it.
I will see you at Olive Garden, that is for sure.
I'm going down there now. Getting started after this.
Awesome. Everybody have a great rest of the week, a good night wherever you are. And thank you again for joining. We really appreciate it in the community. Cheers, everybody.
Yeah, bye.